Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB Pro bodybuilder. Today's guest is Mark Smith. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Quentin. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mark. I'm excited to chop it up with you. I kind of like to start each conversation by asking my guests the same two questions. So the first question I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
Favorite of all time have to be number one is going to be Jay Cutler, and then Branch Warren would be like close behind that. And then the one that got me wanting to do bodybuilding in the first place was Franco Colombo.
Awesome. Why Jay Cutler number one?
Well, when I was a much younger man, like he was coming up, and he was the perfect ambassador of what bodybuilding should be. Fan friendly. I got to meet him a handful of times when I was much younger. I've got to meet him this day and age as well, and he's still always the same, nice, always willing to talk to any fan at any point in time, just to have a conversation. And he just was like the epitome of like professionalism for the sport. And he had, in my opinion, like a fantastic physique, even though he had a lot of naysayers when he first turned professional. A lot of people didn't think he would do anything. He didn't care, and he just stuck to it and built the physique that eventually dethroned Ronnie Coleman at some point, which is the best bodybuilder to ever walk the face of the earth. So no simple feat.
Very cool. Very cool. So tell myself and the listeners, Mark, at what age did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that age?
Sure. I started lifting weights at 14 years old because that's when the doctors cleared me to be able to train. I did it mostly just for sports because I played football, lacrosse, and basketball for a short duration of time, then eventually switched into powerlifting. But I just wanted to become strong. Just like any youthful teenager, I was obsessed with having like the highest bench press in my high school, which I did. And then just kind of, as soon as they touched my hands, I pretty much knew that that's what I wanted to do. And so when the other sports kind of fell away and my height and stature kind of took out the NFL and certain other things that I would never obtain to, that was always there for me. So I gravitated to it, loved it, and just ever did it ever since. And then I did my first bodybuilding show at the age of 18. I was terrible. I did awful. Wasn't coached very well. Didn't really know what I was doing, and I fumbled through the sport for quite a while until I found my groove and figured out exactly how I wanted to do this.
Very cool. So we'll get kind of into all the bodybuilding talk here in a minute. So you mentioned sports a little bit. That's kind of the impetus behind the strength training at 14. But why don't you talk a little bit about where you grew up, talk about family, talk about some of the sports. You kind of already mentioned the sports that you played, but maybe some of the positive aspects of sports that you took away from childhood. And then it sounds like you kind of got into powerlifting at a pretty young age. So why don't you just unpack your younger years for us up to high school, and then we'll talk post-high school at that point.
Sure. I'm born and raised in upstate New York. I'm from a city called Rochester. I grew up in a small suburb of Henrietta. My high school was Rush Henrietta. It was two smaller towns linked together. So from there, pretty much all of my family is still up in Rochester, New York. My parents are down here because I'm an only child. So we all moved together when I finished high school. And then just pretty much as far as sports is, like football was my go-to. That was the family thing. My dad was a huge fan of the Cleveland, still is a fan, sadly, still a huge fan of the Cleveland Browns. And I just always watched football with my parents and mostly my father and my uncles. And we always played football. And I was just like played peewee. As soon as I was old enough to hit people, we were hitting each other. And I just loved the sport. I dreamed like most kids to one day become, get in the NFL at some point. Also was a giant fan of the Wrestling Federation, the old school WWF and WWE. I was a teenager during the Attitude Era. So I got to watch The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. I loved wrestling immensely, even try to do it for a short duration, not actual like collegiate wrestling, like actual like professional wrestling style. Lacrosse was something my mother pushed into me. It's a very good finesse sport. There's a lot of endurance. I think all those things just kind of get me very routined and very kind of regimented. I love basketball too, but sadly I'm only 5'5", so that kind of went away pretty quick once I hit high school. So I eventually discovered powerlifting because it was a way of competing with weightlifting. And that was just something I was naturally just good at and gifted at. Strength, which came to me quite easy. And so I just loved doing that. And so I was doing three sports, didn't really know how to eat correctly or anything like that. Just as any teenager, just kind of like pounding food and just being a teenager. But it gave me the mindset of figuring out like how to do training routines. We had a really good strength coach at the time, who was really gravitated to me and helped me kind of like figure out exactly what I wanted to do and how to work with that sport. I mean, team sports, with all honesty, was never really my thing. I enjoyed my positionings and I played the hell out of them when I did them. Sadly, during my tenure growing up, my teams weren't really that good, so I didn't get to like relish in like state championships or sectionals or anything of that nature. But I got to play my positions the best that I could and do the best that I can. And so I always had that kind of feeling that everything's always going to be on my shoulders and I could just do the best that I can. The one thing I always excelled at was powerlifting, because it is an individual sport with team point associated with it. So I never lost. Nobody ever beat me in powerlifting. And so that was always something I kind of enjoyed. But I think for any youth, sports is just good to kind of give that regimen of like daily practice, going through routines, things of that nature. But I also think, it lets you figure out what you kind of truly love. Because I know when I was getting into my later years of high school, I would stop weightlifting during, I wouldn't weightlift as much during the football and lacrosse seasons because we practiced so much. There really wasn't much time for weight training. And as high schoolers, typically weight training is not a huge part of their regimens for the kids. So I remember just being like mad that I just wanted to, I'd rather just work out as opposed to go run laps and like to go through drills. And so eventually when I got to the point where I could just do that, I was like, yeah, this is what I should be doing instead. But the other thing, it lets you just figure things out and it keeps you out of trouble. It makes you, we got a lot of lifelong bonds of friends that I still keep in touch with to this day. And it gives you that kind of ability to figure out what you're naturally going to be good at and where you can and can't make it for that portion of it.
Excellent. So we're going to get into you're in academia currently. You have a doctorate degree. So at some point, if not maybe from the beginning because of your parents, I'd like to know, but was academics something that was strongly, pushed in your family? Was it something that you just kind of excelled at? Talk about how you kind of really got engrossed in academics, please, Mark.
Sure. Like with all honesty, my family is not very versed in the academia field. I'm one of the only college educated people in my family. It was pushed that I should get good grades and I should finish school and I should stay in school. But neither one of my parents ever went to college, so they just wanted me to be better than them. So I completely understand that as a parent now. But it was just something I did out of necessity, so to speak. I got involved in it. I didn't really know where to go. I remember, just like as anybody, I got my personal training certification at 17, right after high school, and I started doing the community college part-time, just kind of figuring out where I was going to lay. As far as career-wise, I had this like mindset of maybe doing like some type of fitness field and human nutrition or something of that nature. And then I started to kind of like learn it, didn't like it, didn't really get along with that setup of how that academia worked, and then just kind of found my hone in like the business and leadership and management standpoint. When I was probably in my like early 20s, I make big goals and I just go for them. That's what I do. And so I told myself when I was like 19 years old that I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to finish my doctorate degree. I'm not a medical doctor, but I had that degree. And I said, I want to finish my PhD. That's something I want to do. And I'm just going to keep doing it. So over the next almost decade, that's what I did. I got into school and I worked full time. When we first moved to Arizona, I was 18, 19 years old. So I did most of my college here in Arizona. So as soon as I got into classes, I doubled up. I figured out what major made sense. I didn't, pussyfoot around about like figuring out where I was going to be or anything like that. I knew what classes I needed to graduate, and I just did them. And I had a full-time job at the time in corporate America. So I was working, 40, 50 hours a week and doing the classwork on the side. I didn't care, and still working out and trying to train and do bodybuilding stuff as well. And I just kept doing it. So I finished my bachelor's when I was 21, my first master's degree before I was 23. And then I took a year off, finished another one before I was 26, and then started my doctoral program and finished that when I turned 31. And so it was just something I just kind of like, I'm a completionist. If I say I'm going to do something and I set my mind to it, I'm going to do it until I can't. And academia, as I tell my students and I tell anybody, it's not necessarily that, it's not that it's not for everybody. It's just, it is hard, and it's something that's it's like time consuming and it's tedious, but if you want to finish it, there's nothing that's going to stop you from completing it. It's not something that's just in the cards or not. There's no luck involved with it. It's just work. And as long as you're willing to do the work and pick the right path for you, you can do it. And so that's what I did. And, and I finished it, and I was happy with it, and I never want to do it again.
Right, for sure, for sure. So before we get a little bit deeper into the academia and the book that you've written and things like that, I want to take one step back quickly. Your parents, you said that, they didn't go to college and stuff. Either did my parents. I think maybe it was more of a generational thing, right? But what did they instill in you? What was something that they left with you, or something, or a few things that they gave you in terms of just passing on some knowledge or some wisdom?
Oh yeah, my mom was definitely my biggest cheerleader in my youth and biggest part of my adolescent life. I mean, she was always there. She volunteered at the high school. She was working at the high school. Like, she was there, and she was my best friend, my go-to. So she was just like my biggest support system. As far as my dad, as I got older, he instilled more like the grown-up skills that go with it. Paying your bills on time, taking your taxes information, just staying consistent. And even though they don't come from, I mean, they had rough upbringings and they have blue collar based positions still to this day. I mean, they instill just a level of, like, I guess, continuity and a foundation for me. I'm an only child, so I am their bread and butter. And so even to this day, they live down the street from me, and they still are people I go to. And if I need anything, we're back and forth every holiday, everything. They're involved heavily in my life. And so they instill just great parenting. I mean, I can just, they have their quirks like any parents. They have their little quirks. My mom is a hoarder, and and then my dad never really likes to leave the house and do anything. But so they instilled those kind of things of like things I would like to do that we didn't really do as youngsters. But they instilled a foundation of consistency, and they never had ups and downs, and they never showed that to me. And they just were always loving and supportive parents the whole time. And they would have those tough conversations with me too if they felt like I wasn't going in the right direction. And they're not afraid to pull punches, and no consolation prizes here. Like, if I messed up, they would tell me right to my face and make sure I knew it.
Perfect. I like it. Just straight to the point, right? So one more question about childhood, and then we'll move on, Mark. But was there a coach, was there another adult figure in your life during childhood that had a really big influence or impact on your life, or was it mostly just your parents?
Yeah, I mean, for not so much like sports wise, because I mean, well, actually it was. I mean, for football and lacrosse, I never really had anybody that I really gravitated to too hard. But we had my powerlifting coach for the short time I had him. His name was Cassius Goff. He was like, I don't even know. He just reminded me of like a CT Fletcher. He just had that kind of screaming personality of like, you wanted to give him everything you had. And so our practices were, there's amount of, like, even though it was a small group of us that were doing powerlifting, that electricity was immense. And we were a formidable team for how small we were when it came to that. And he just would get us to do things that we never thought we could do. And he just had that like charisma about him. So it was definitely a fantastic experience to have that when I was, like 14, 15 years old, especially starting out in the bodybuilding career, or just like lifting weights in general. So he was, yeah, I don't think I've ever had been around or had been motivated by another individual as much as that person in my entire life. But yeah, so he was probably like the biggest inspiration for that portion of it.
Cool. So let's start talking about bodybuilding a little bit. So obviously you start lifting weights for sports at 14, do the powerlifting. When did actual bodybuilding training? And now I do remember, as I was saying this, your first show, you said you competed at 18. So when did the bodybuilding training kind of start? And when did you really start getting exposed and into what we call bodybuilding?
Sure. Before I finished high school, I started kind of, because as seniors, we couldn't really compete in powerlifting for points. It was more for fun. So I started to change my training principles a little bit into more of bodybuilding repertoire, different muscle group connections, and not just focusing on bench, squat, deadlift situations. But the movie that, like, just like most of us, Pumping Iron was probably my biggest inspiration to want to do bodybuilding, and not so much Arnold, because I mean, I'm not afraid to say I never was a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger's physique, still don't understand the ambiance of it. Franco Columbu was a much more compact and complete bodybuilder at the time. And so same height, similar dimensions. He's, you know, he's Italian. I'm half Sicilian. So I just like kind of gravitated to him because we've, you know, met certain criteria. And he was immensely strong for his size too. So he made me want to try it out. So I remember I just started personal training people at the time right after high school, and I started figuring out the bodybuilding principles. And I had one of my coworkers offered to help me try it for my first ever show. It was a small natural show in upstate New York. And we just kind of like cardioed and dieted the crap out of me, and nothing really panned out really well because I was so young and the muscle was too new, and and I didn't really know what I was doing. But that's what, and then it's so I, you know, took last in every class I did. It was a bad taste in my mouth, but I was like, no, I can do this better. So it just made me want to try again. And then I just slowly but surely figured it out and got better over time. So my natural talent is always strength. I've always been an immensely strong individual. So learning to cater that the right way to create the proper physique for bodybuilding is a much different atmosphere and mindset. So but yeah, but Franco Columbu was the guy that got me to want to bodybuild.
Cool. And it's a kind of an interesting, unique correlation because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Franco was a doctor and doctor of chiropractic, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's just, I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but I mean, it's kind of cool that he was a doctor and you've become a doctor. So that's kind of a unique thread there. So let's talk a little bit more about you know, competing in bodybuilding, because I want to get back into the business talk here in your book and leadership and stuff like that. But before we go too far with that, I do want to talk a little bit more about bodybuilding. So you had your first competition experience, left a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth, but you said, hey, I can get better. Where did you go from there in terms of competing and just kind of, you know, immersing yourself in the bodybuilding culture?
Sure. So I competed like I was teenager at the time. So I think I was still 17 or 18-ish. I forget what the age record is. And so me and my parents moved to Arizona that following, I think, like winter into summer. And so less than a year later, I tried it again. I read a lot more. I got more adversed into like the proper dieting principles and things of that nature. And I tried my hand again in another small show when I was 19. And then I was able to actually place in those shows. So I got better. And so I was like, okay, I think I can figure this out. And so I just kept doing it on the side, so to speak, while I was still going to school and personal training and trying to figure things out. It was kind of a hobby into my early 20s. Just kind of playing around with it kept me like focused here and there, kept me from like getting too heavy, things like that. And then, you know, I did this stereotypical early 20s thing of somebody that lived right by ASU or Arizona State University and went out all the time and like chased women, things like that. That didn't, you know, I did really terrible at one of the shows I was preparing for. I remember I didn't even start really dieting till like 6 weeks out. It came in really soft and just looked terrible. And I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. I can't balance this type of situation. So I stopped going out and partying so much. And I started getting more focused on it, more focused in school, and it clicked easier. Those two things going hand in hand, having almost no time with a full-time job and, you know, going to school and doubling up on classes and bodybuilding, like it becomes a very good routine to have. And I like that kind of consistency. And then in my early 20s, I started thinking, I'm like, well, I'm starting to, you know, do better. I can win shows. I kind of want to see where this goes. And so I started focusing on more on like, you know what, I want to be a professional bodybuilder. Like when I think it was like 21, 22 at the time, like I want to really make a go at it. I think I could do it. And so I just went after it. I started like really focusing on my training, getting my protocols and everything set, my diet on point. I still thought I could do it myself with nobody's guidance or help. So I was very stubborn in that part of it. I just researched a lot of like what the guys were doing, kept up on like all the bodybuilding based diets and training fads and what was specific in that time era. And I went at it. And so I compete. I typically in Arizona at the time, well, Arizona in general is not a good, it's not a good like regional show ground. There's not an immense amount of talent in the amateur level that come to compete here. So I would always go to LA and California to compete a lot to gauge it. And then I tried my hand at USA's a bunch of times and would place, either not place or get in the top 10 here and there. And so it was just kind of this like progression of figuring it out, but it became like something I was so consistently doing that I didn't know how to not do it. So I would compete almost every year and gradually just keep getting better and better. But, that's pretty much how it went from that phase. Then it became an obsession in my mid to late 20s. And then now I'm where I am now.
Cool. So who or what were some of those early influences in terms of your training, your nutrition? I'm sure we're probably right around the same age, but I know when I was growing up, the magazines were huge. I mean, yes. YouTube didn't even exist. So what was there like one person or a couple of people maybe from the magazines or DVDs? You mentioned Jay Cutler earlier that really had an influence on the nutrition, on the training. And if so, who were some of those people, Mark?
Yeah, sure. I followed Jay's career immensely. Like his tenacity and just like the way that he eats and structured his life around it was like all inspiring. So I tried to do the best I could with it. I mean, I hate fish, so I didn't eat it as much as he did. But the way that he ate, I mean, I tried to emulate him immensely. And the shitty part is I couldn't because I'm not his same stature and size, and especially in my youth, I wasn't either. So it didn't really work out that at best for that. And then also I would look at different diets for. I also like followed how like Palumbo at the time Dave Palumbo was very popular at the time. So I remember looking at his like really low carb keto style, and I tried that most of the time because it seemed to work well for my physique to get me the leanness that I needed to do that. And yeah, I just kind of figured it out based on that. I tried like the whole carb cycling because that was common. I've done everything there is to know when it comes to like the really highs and lows of basically things you shouldn't be doing nowadays of the new school style of bodybuilding. But yeah, I read the magazines just like you. Like every muscular development I could get my hands on. I loved reading up on it. I loved following Jay's career. And then when James Flex Lewis got popular, I followed him too because we're around the same age. And so I just really getting immersed in how they did things. I looked at like how Yanni was training his guys and things like that. I was a sponge to figure things out. I just was wanting to figure it out on my own though. I didn't allow somebody to kind of help me out with that portion of it.
Cool. So how has your training, if it has, evolved over the years? And like, what is your training kind of currently?
Sure. I always had like a power, like I'm a meathead at heart, especially when my youth. So, I mean, being the strongest human being on the planet for pound to pound was one of the things I always liked to do. I didn't compete at it, but I just wanted to be super strong. So my old school methodology was like, I have like, chest one day, back one day, like quads one day, hamstrings day, shoulder day. Every day I never took a day off. Every day had a muscle group attached to it. And I always trained heavy and I always trained hard. I always was pushing thresholds of trying to just do as much as I possibly could. 500-pound bench presses are not something I'm scared of and can easily do. 700-pound squats is something that was normal. 500-pound rows, was normal. That was a normal week. There was nothing extravagant. There was nothing hardcore about it. That's just what my daily training regimen was. And I video logged it as I got older and was like, this is just how I train. But what I learned over time is that I would get really heavy in the off season. Like I'd get up in the 250, 260 range, be super strong, be able to move a lot of weight. But then I would diet and I would drop down to still being a light heavy every damn year. It was almost annoying. Physique would be marginally better, but like the lines didn't look that great. Everything kind of compact in. My back wasn't developing that well. My V taper was kind of trashy because my midsection was stocky. My legs were big on the outside, but I wasn't building my inner thighs or my abductors correctly. And just those little nuances that as you get older. And then what eventually happened is like I got to a threshold of like doing the best I could. I took a short hiatus to have my daughter. And then when I came back, I was like, I need to figure this out better. So After I linked up with John Jewett as my coach, he completely overhauled my training methods. I mean, I showcased him what I was doing, and he's like, all right, we're going to make some adjustments. And so we started doing push-pull leg type situations where I had more compound movements and multiple muscle groups attached. And we took away a lot of my big lift movements because he said, like, heavy squats there's more cons than pros with that. There's not, the risk isn't worth the reward. And he's like, and flat bench is not going to get you anywhere because John has a bench press record. And he said his chest was the worst when he started bodybuilding. He had a 600-pound bench press. And I was like, okay, I can relate to that. So let's do this. And so we took away a lot of the stuff. We formulated my physique to be a much more presentable and more, I don't want to say healthy, but a better showcase of what bodybuilding is supposed to look like. My muscle developed a lot better, and I don't ache and not beat up all the time as far as what that does to you. And my kind of mentality of I don't take it easy. I just don't. So even when my knees would bother me or my shoulders would bother me, I still would push as heavy, as hard as I humanly possibly. Now I'm a little bit more intelligent about it and precise. I focus on rep ranges and motions and full range and getting the proper squeeze and pump out of things. So it's a lot more of a constructive, I guess, methodology type training and a lot more scientific to what I'm trying to do for the longevity, as opposed to just seeing if I can bench 405 for 15 reps, or if I can break my 315 bench press record, which is 33 reps. That isn't gonna do anything. It's gonna tear my pack. That's what it's gonna do.
Excellent. So tell us, Mark, do you feel like when you're younger and your body's just maybe a little bit more pliable, do you feel like some sort of strength training in terms of powerlifting, power building, whatever you want to use? I think everybody gets the point, but you feel like some sort of foundational training in terms of training for strength and trying to push some heavy weights, you feel like that is pretty important to lay the foundation when you're younger, or not?
I would have to say I agree with that it is something you should have the foundations for. Squat, bench, deadlift, even though that might not be something you keep in your repertoire your entire lifting career, it still should be things that are the foundation of figuring out exactly how to properly move your muscle tissue, hand placement, core strength, and getting the proper balance and mechanics in for every lift that comes with it. Being able to handle 400 or 500-pound bench presses makes you have core strength, you have hip movement, you have mobility, and you have comfort with those types of lifts. If you're not used, and it also doesn't make you scared of things. I think the cliche is big weights make big muscles, but that is true. Granted, you don't have to necessarily have a 1-2 rep max to do it, but you still need to be able to move heavy amounts of weight for longevity if you want to maintain and great size and growth on your muscle tissue. So I believe it creates a hard foundation to build upon. And so because like I said, Branch Warren was one of my favorite bodybuilders to watch train. The intensity and the amount of fearlessness that went into it. That's how you should train, especially when you're younger and less chance of you having these kind of significant career-ending injuries. I say go for it and do what you can. Once you build that foundation, I got my biggest, I got into the 260, 270s. I don't need more muscle tissue. It's more about just refining it and making it look right. So when you get to that stage, that's when you can have more of the Charles Glass kind of, I want to sculpt you type situation, as opposed to but if you don't have that, you can't just create that. Otherwise the muscle's not going to look right. You're not going to have that grittiness, that dryness that comes with maturity. It's going to look kind of bubbly and soft, and it's never going to look right. And you're never going to get to your full potential.
Perfect. So after all those years of just kind of doing the bodybuilding thing on your own in terms of trying to figure, preps out and diet, nutrition and training and stuff, why was John Jewett the individual that you chose to hire to be your coach?
Oh, good question. Well, all right. So yeah, I tried to do it myself for almost a decade, and I never got higher than maybe a 13th place at a USA's in the light heavyweight category. I was just at my wit's end. So I have a close friend here in Arizona named Scott Turner, who is also an IFBB Pro. I was at USA's when he turned, and he offered to help me for one of my preps, just because he was curious to see what he could do with me. And just having an outside guidance, and Scott's not a guru of any sort. He just kind of, he worked with Shelby Starnes for a long period of time. He knows give him a shit. So I let him have a crack at me. And he changed up a bunch of things, didn't mess with my training methodology, because he's like, your muscle is your muscle, and we're not going to really do much to it. He's like, we're going to add a little bit more volume to it as far as like higher rep ranges, but he didn't change my sequencing. And so we went to work, and he did well. I mean, he made me got me a lot leaner, got me a lot harder. I didn't have to do as high amount of cardio as I had done in the past. The diet was still pretty tough. And there was still a good amount of diuretics, but we got me refined, and I was able to get into the top 10 of USA's that year. So I was like, this is a lot better than what I would have done on my own. And so I wanted to do it again, but when the thing I love, but also disliked about working with Scotty is that he had this very relaxed mentality to everything. And I love him for it. He's one of the greatest people to be around, because he has this kind of like, he's always in a good mood. And so he'd give me the coaching, and I'd ask him some like more in-depth questions about certain things. And he didn't really have scientific answers to go with him, which he didn't know. And it doesn't fault him. He just knows that works, and that's what he feels is going to work. And so I wanted somebody that was a little bit more higher end and a little bit more methodical. So my ex-wife, we were married at the time. She had an acquaintance that worked with John and talked him up. And we went to Olympia. We linked up with him through messaging. And I said, hey, I'm coming up to, I'm going to be trying my hand at the Masters USA's this year. I'd like to see if you would like to prep me. And he took a look at my pictures, and he agreed he'd like to do it. So we worked together then. If you ever listen to any of John's podcasts or watch any of his stuff, he's super meticulous about everything. And I wanted that. And he's also, he's got a master's degree. He was a registered dietitian, like a lot of similarities that we worked well with. He's also a shorter, bald man. I'm just joking, but it resonated well. He's very meticulous, very methodical, very scientific to everything. And I wanted that, because as much as I am very organized and structured in a lot of other things that are my passion points, this isn't one of them. And I wanted somebody to do it for me. And I have no fault of following orders to a T. And I definitely knew that, especially near the end and the tail end, is when most of us self-sabotage, and I needed someone else to do it. And he changed up everything. Like, I used to not diet with a lot of carbs. Now I eat tons of them, and we diet into it, and sodium, water high all the time. The training principles changed to be more like methodical and specific to the muscle groups of mine that need to come up and match the other ones. And it just changed everything. And then when we did Masters USA's, after only 12 weeks of prep together, I won the heavyweight class, missed my pro card by one spot. And then the following year, we turned professional, because he knew what to do, and I trust him.
Cool. So we're gonna talk about you earning your IFBB Pro card here in a little bit, but this is I think a fascinating question, because you did kind of try to do it on your own for so long, right? So I think you'd be a great person to speak to myself and the listeners about this, maybe some of the younger listeners. But if you could do it all over again, would you take the same route of trying to do it on your own for a decade? Would you maybe do it for a couple of years, then hire a coach? I mean, is there anything that you would change? What would you say to anybody listening in terms of pursuing a coach at like what age, at what stage of bodybuilding? Talk to us about that, please.
Sure. I think you should start spending your money and putting your resources and time into finding the proper coach when you yourself have kind of learned a good amount about yourself through exploring and figuring things out through kind of like competing in the lower levels. When you can finally like walk into a local level show and pretty much be the guy that's going to win that class. Like when they're at the smaller regional shows, there's always one or two guys that those are the winners. This is how it works. And when you can get to close to that status on your own with just a natural kind of figuring things out, and you have that passion point for it, that you did it that far by yourself, that's when you start seeking out to spend the money. And you should do your research and find people that make sense for you. Because, I've had so many of my colleagues and friends, they have coaches, I don't even know who these people's names are. And like, okay, I mean, they might work, they might not. Like, I want to see a track history. I want to see success. I want to see, have they done it themselves? Or do they have a good amount of athletes? What's their backstory? Anybody could say they're a coach, and then they just ruin your physique and destroy your metabolism rates. It happens to women all the time. But, but you want to find somebody that's going to really bring you to that next level. So look at who the best are at that time. And if it costs you extra, who cares? You're going to be guided by the best. Like, so, like at the time when I was super young, I kind of wish I just dumped all my money into working with Yanni about at the time, or George Farah was super popular too. Like those guys, I saw the people that they brought to shows and they always got a look, and a lot of them would win the classes, and they were working with some of the top level pros. And that just the name makes weight in our sport. Like as shitty as that sounds, like the judges, the media, the rest of the athletes, they're looking at these higher end coaches and the talent that they bring. I mean, as long as the talent meets the criteria of what they're supposed to, then they're the ones that are going to be like deemed the winners and getting in the mix. I can't say that favoritism isn't going to win you a show. Your body has to, but I mean, having that coach in your corner and having that kind of pull and the person guide you the right way, that makes a world of difference. So I say, like, as soon as you can get to a level where you are a formidable foe by yourself, that's when you should start seeking it to put you to the next level.
Excellent. All right. So let's get back into kind of like your life outside of bodybuilding. So you graduate high school, you started doing some personal training, going to college, get your undergraduate degree, get your master's degree, get your doctorate. Now, you also said you were working full time. So with the personal training, but then it sounds like you got into the business world. So just talk about, once you started personal training, started going to college, where was your mind at in terms of what you wanted to do career-wise or what you wanted to be? It seems like you definitely have a head on your shoulders, and you probably realized that pretty quickly, like, hey, like there's bodybuilding, it's a passion, I love it, but I'm not going to make a career of it, right? You weren't delusional. So what were you kind of pursuing in terms of maybe undergraduate, master's degree? What were you really hoping to do or become career-wise?
Sure. All right. So I entered the college world when I was, like college age. So when I got into the business, all my degrees are business or management or leadership based. So my bachelor's in business management, I finished that because I wanted something in business, just because I knew it was the most well-rounded bachelor's degree that I could go into. And then when I finished I went right into my MBA right after that, and I was working full time through Apollo Group here in Arizona. And so they were fronting the bill also for education, which is one of the reasons to take advantage of it. And so when I finished my MBA, I was hoping to get into like senior leadership of that organization and move up the ranks. And I don't know, I never had grandeurs of starting my own company or anything like that. I wanted to be like a high level executive, Wolf of Wall Street type. I never was big on like, I don't like the stock market. I follow it, but I'm not huge into the financial investment portions of things. And I work with it because you have to, but I pretty much just want to be a high level position, nice business cards, kind of that kind of mentality. That's what I thought. I had this delusional thought that when I'd finished my MBA, when I was, like 23 years old, that all of a sudden all these opportunities would come out of nowhere, and I'd be able to like have these, 100K executive positions just waiting for me anywhere I wanted to go. That doesn't work like that. So as soon as I finished my MBA, I still was working with the same company. I was trying to grind my gears and work the best I could. I was in a military, very specific division, even though I'm not military. And I was doing quite well. But I just come to, corporate America is something that you learn to either really enjoy or really, really dislike. And over time, I became very disdained with the functionality of that situation. When I went into so the company I was working with, I finished my MBA. I wanted to move up the organization. I couldn't. They would not promote me under any way, shape, and form because of my age. I was super young, according to everybody else. And I also wasn't one of the good old boy types. I didn't go to happy hours. I wasn't, mixing and mingling. I didn't kiss ass. I didn't do any of that stuff. I would work my long hours. I'd go work out. I'd go home. I'd do the same thing over and over again. And so I didn't really fit in their formula for what they wanted for an executive or a management type position. So I eventually left and went to a different company. Grand Canyon University, GCU, was starting up their online division and needed some people that were versed in the education system. So I came over there. I finished my second master's with them in leadership, but still same type of thing. Still a corporate-based office and entity. To try to pretend to be a college. And they it just didn't work out. Same thing. And then, but what I started to learn is I started to get to know the faculty a bit more, the professors, and see what they did. And no matter what, I enjoyed interacting with every professor I've ever typically had, and whether or not it was always positive or negative. I've had very seldom terrible professors in my college years. And then especially working as a working adult doing night classes as opposed, I got to be taught by some very high level people because they were also in the field while they were teaching. So I remember I was taught by finance by like a secretary of treasury of an African nation. Like my HR person worked for Google. Like it was like, these are people that know their shit. And so I enjoyed learning directly from them. And so after I finished I think like 5 or 6 years at GCU, I was like, I really would like to be a professor. I'm like, what does that kind of take? Because I had an MBA and I had a Master of Science in Leadership, but trying to break into teaching at 25 years old with only 2 master's degrees in business related fields, it's not that easy to do, and it's not a high needs area in those areas. So I was like, all right, what else am I going to do? So my mentor at the time, Phil Vella, he was a really high level executive for Cisco Systems. He recommended I get into IT sales. So I'm like, okay, I'll figure IT stuff. So I went and worked for another corporate entity doing IT sales, which is even worse. Cold calling businesses is probably the worst thing to do on the face of the earth. I used to be a mason when I was a teenager. I would rather do that. And but anyway, so I learned, what I did is I put my head into it and I learned everything I could about IT stuff, hardware, software. I got certified in everything under the sun when it had to do with tech because I wanted to be immersed in everything. And if someone asked me a question, I did not want to not know the answer. So I went to every seminar we had every single manufacturer on the planet on site. So I would learn and get every certification I could through them. And I got pretty formidable with that information. Figured out I didn't want to do IT stuff anymore. And I hated sales. I got so sick of that portion of it. And I was like, God, I got to do something else. So luckily, my best friend at the time, Angel Fuentes, was a math professor for University of Advancing Technology, the company I work for today. And he's like, well, we could use an adjunct. He's like, I know your tenacity, you'd be good there. So he weaseled his way into getting me an adjunct job doing just online classes. I did well. They brought me in to do physical classes. I did even better. And then once I did my first couple lectures, I'm like, this is what I need to do. Like, this is me. This is it. It's a mix of entertainment, stand-up comedy, and just like regurgitating, making these kids into people like you. I mean, it's awesome. Yeah, I've been doing it ever since, would not want to do anything else. And so I started as an adjunct, got to do some in-person classes. They brought me on half-time, then I went full-time, then I got promoted to chair. And yeah, I just love what I do.
So what is it, like you just said you love what you do. What is it that kind of like, just gets you fired up about educating young people, maybe some older people as well, right? But what is it that really makes you passionate about that education and that teaching?
Well, there's a couple of things. It's the teaching itself is super rewarding and actually instilling these abilities in these students. And now that I've been doing it for a good amount of years, I have a lot of graduate students that I still keep in contact with that ask me for referrals or ask me for, they ask me to be a reference and things of that nature. And I give them, letters of recommendation and things like that. And they also come back and enjoy the skill sets and the things I instilled in them as students. That's something I take super pride in. But that's one part of it. The second part is my organization in general. When I was in corporate America as a very large, muscular individual, you stick out like a sore thumb and you do not fit that mold. You just don't. No matter how much you try to be like a good old person and you try to do what they want, you're always going to look at it as a weirdo because they don't like the way you eat. They don't like that you're not into all these things. They think your lifestyle is strange, et cetera, et cetera. And all the same stupid stereotypes that come with being muscular. I'm not smart enough to do things. I'm, self-centered, whatever, all the same bullshit that goes with it. When I got into academia, one of the nicest things I was ever told is after I was working there for a little while, they're like, because the students know me on campus for my size and stature. My nickname is Mark the Shark. They address me as that. So Dr. Mark the Shark. And the students love my size and stature. They use me as models in video games and shit like that. But one of my colleagues took me aside and was like, you know what, the students gravitate to you because of your, your presence and your willingness to talk with them, and you're easy to talk to and approach. He's like, but we pay you for your mind. He's like, we don't care about any of this other stuff. You're here to build classes and to do your lectures, and that's what you do best. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's one of the nicest things anyone's ever said to me, because normally in our industry, we're objectified by our physiques. Like, no one gives a shit about our free thinking thought or what we can actually bring to a table. And so to be told that I was there because of the way I think in my mind, not for my physical stature or ability to produce something, it was an amazing feeling.
Very cool. So I want to get into the book that you wrote. So it's called How to Not Suck at Leadership. Love the title, man. So what was the impetus behind you writing a book, this book specifically? And then why are you, kind of the same question about teaching, being a professor, why are you passionate about leadership?
Sure. So I've been wanting to write a book for quite some time on leadership, just for the amount of years that, I was going through my Master's of Science in Leadership and my doctoral program, watching trashy leadership in front of me. Like, everything I was taught in my textbooks and theory and the instructors were telling me, I was watching the exact opposite going on right in front of my face. And so I was like, man, this is something I need to kind of address. And I need to do it in a manner that's not going to be long-winded and not going to be kind of like, I didn't do it for money, and I'm not doing it to gain a name in the game or do TED Talk bullshit. It's more of like, these are skill sets and things people just need to have on their mind so they can actually be good at what they do. And so when I got into academia, I knew that I wanted to kind of create a book and a module system, and something that would eventually be able to use in the classroom, but also possibly be done as corporate trainings down the line to help people become better leaders. Because what I was seeing in corporate America was not necessarily that they were hiring the wrong people to do the job, which they were, but these individuals were taking on leadership and management roles with no teaching behind it. Like, you were just good at the job that you did. You got promoted to be a manager of 8 people, 10 people, 15 people doing the same job you were doing, and you have no formal training on how to handle this situation. They'll teach you how to do the timestamps or the books or the logistics, but they don't teach you how to deal with the people or how to motivate them, inspire them, to build them, to do anything. They just teach you how to review them and to reprimand them. And that's not, how do you build a leadership culture? How do you do anything management wise with that kind of mentality? And so I was like, there's a huge disconnect here. I've been to a million seminars on how to sell bullshit better, but I never went to a leadership seminar, how to be a better manager or leader. The company used to force us to do all sorts of shit, but not that. And so I was like, this needs to be done. And so, I read a couple other leadership books, and they're, like I said, they're fluff, long-winded, 200-page things that don't need to be that long. So I was like, I'm just be concise because I'm not reading all that shit. So I sat for about 3 months straight. It was during my turning pro prep. I was like, I got time on my hands because I was dealing with a custody battle, a bunch of other shit. I'm like, I got this, I can do this. So I sat down and I just wrote it, and I published it, and I've sold about like 200 copies so far. It's ingrained into, I try to ingrain it in all my students, and it's just pretty much all of my life work of watching and observing and my thoughts and theories on how you should handle things in that situation. And so I put that out there. I have another book too, but that's more about motivation.
Okay. So just tell us then, from your experiences and your perspective, what makes a great leader? And then how does somebody kind of, like, if they are in a leadership role and they have employees or people that they oversee, how do you create like a positive, effective culture then?
Sure. All right. So when I talk to my students or anybody about leadership, I say leadership is not complicated. It stems from 2 main things. It starts with humility and starts with care. As long as you have these 2 essential things, everything else can be kind of learned and figured out, and people will gravitate to you over time. So that's it. And so it has to be true. It can't be fake humility. It can't be fake care for others. Those things have to be there. After that, you can start to add in different aspects of it. Ability to have empathy, ability to have good emotional intelligence and understanding situation-based things, and knowing how to cultivate talent, how to communicate correctly, how to motivate, inspire individuals specifically. Those things you can kind of figure out over time as you learn about individuals, but it starts with those two things of having this ability to keep yourself on a humble level, that you're not better than everybody else, that you're all on the same playing field. No matter what your bullshit title is, you guys are all people trying to do the same thing. And then as long as you actually want your subordinates and the people around you to be successful and to have, prosperity, then everything else will fall into place. If it's selfishness, if it's comes from a selfish nature, it's eventually going to be seen out, and it's not going to be in a good place, and you're always going to sacrifice them over you, and it's going to eventually exude out. When it comes to building that type of foundation, it comes from picking the right individuals to start the journey in the mindset, because in various organizations, you have a lot of people that are self-centered and self-interest, which I get it. I mean, we're all in it for ourselves, but when it comes down to trying to cultivate a group of individuals to excel in a team-based environment, you can't be a selfish person. A head coach can't be all about me, otherwise the team doesn't really care, respond. And managers and leaders have to have the same mentality. They have to understand that role that they're taking is not for a title, not for money. It's to serve the individuals that they work for. It's a sacrifice. It's not like a promotion in that light shouldn't be taken as like, it should be taken as an honor that you have the ability to do this, not like, yay, for me, look what I did. No, because now you have to manage 12 individuals that may hate you. So good luck with that one. And so that's where it all stems and comes from. And I think a problem is that our society and organizations today have gotten into this systematic area of like, we find somebody that does something well and assume that we can put them in a position of power to make other people do things well. And we'll look over, the natural ability to lead over, performance and metrics and numbers. And that's not going to wield well over time. It's going to raise attrition. It's going to cause a shitty work environment, and then that person's not equipped to motivate people when they get down. They're going to try to reprimand them. They're going to try to make them into clone versions of them. And that's not how this works. Success isn't a linear path. Everyone has their own ways of doing things. And so that's how it kind of works off it. So when it comes down to like building great leaders, it starts with a hard self-reflection of them understanding who they are and making sure that they take on the role, understanding exactly what they're doing. It's not so much that you can teach this to every individual. You have to find the right people that are willing to take on that kind of responsibility, because leading is like I said, it's a sacrifice. It's not a reward. You should leading. That's the way it should be looked at, and that's the way it should be taken.
So, are leaders born, or are leaders created or developed from your perspective?
I think it's a bit of both. I've had this, we have this debate all the time in leadership about like, there's those natural people that have that X factor, that kind of alphaness to them that people resonate to. And that's true. There are a lot of evangelical kind of charismatic visionaries that can get people to do a lot of things, but without the proper skill sets and the proper like true passion and care for the individuals beneath them, it's all kind of superficial. And what ends up happening is those individuals that are visionaries and, focusing more on their charisma, they burn their subordinates and people out, and they'll sacrifice them over what their success is going to look like. And that might get them to look good in certain lights, but the reality is they're not true leaders. They're just people that use other people to get to their success. And a great leader has success all around them and would be the first one to lay down before they would make somebody else self-sacrifice. And that's the way that should be portrayed. And so like, I have a lot of, especially working in my school, University of Advanced Technology, is a very high technical based educational institution. So we have a lot of people that are introverted, a lot of people that have, have some animosity towards having general social conversations. And I say the same thing to them, is that great leaders don't necessarily have to have these amazing Vince Lombardi speeches. They have to be people that other people trust, respect, and will actually work for. And granted, if you can't make a rah-rah speech, or you can't sing karaoke very well or shit like that, no one's going to care if they know that push come to shove, you're not rolling over on them, and then you're going to support them and prop them up and take care of them. People will accept your faults as long as you always have their best interests at heart. And so that's how it should work. So I think if you're born with the instilled ability to care for others and have that kind of ability to self-sacrifice, then you should be fine. But this kind of belief that a natural leader just kind of rises to the occasion and takes over things. No, I think everybody can do that in the right situation. But for true great leaders to exist, you have to have that ability to, want others to succeed and be the first one to step in front of it if it doesn't.
Cool. So we're going to get back into bodybuilding talk, but before we do you have like any like future goals or aspirations in terms of career wise, Mark?
Good question. I've been reassessing those the past few years now, actually, because I've kind of reached my pinnacles. I look at my academia side and I'm thinking that I kind of am looking to eventually, I don't know if I want to go any further higher as far as what I'm doing. I like being a program chair. I like still teaching. I know if I move into being a president or a provost or a dean of some sort, that all kind of goes away. So that's something I've been kind of teetering with. I do know that I would like to spread my leadership gospel, so to speak, a bit more. And I would like to eventually get into more corporate trainings and seminars and things of that nature, and kind of building better leaders over time. So that's what I see myself for leadership wise. I'd like to be a staple in the leadership community of somebody that knows their shit and is somebody that kind of you should emulate and work off of because their stuff's good. And as far as like the bodybuilding side, because I keep my two worlds separate, I want to qualify and go to the Olympia, just like any kid that loves bodybuilding does. I mean, I've made one threshold. Now next venture is to try to win a pro show to earn my invite. And those are my two main goals at the moment to focus on. Excellent.
So great transition into going back into bodybuilding. So we kind of left off where you reach out to John Jewett. You placed great on one of your national shows. And then the next year you came back and you turned pro. So why don't we pick up where you started working with John, that first competition that you did, talk about that. And then let's talk about you turning pro, I believe at the 2020 Masters Nationals. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So let's talk about the lead up to the 2020 Masters Nationals in terms of when you started working with John.
Sure. So the first prep working with John for Masters USA's was only 12 weeks. And we built a physique that won the heavyweight class. And like I said, I lost to the super heavy for the only pro card that comes out of that show. And so I was angry because I thought I should have won, like anybody at that level should. And I remember John has been in such a great support system because, and just like anybody that gets to that kind of level and is like, I missed my shot, I thought. And so I asked him, like, is my physique ready for this? Like, should we pack it in? Because in my mentality, I would do a national level show, I'd pack it in for an entire year and then try my hand again at the exact same show the following year. So I was wondering if he thought the same thing, like an entire year of prep, come back and try to do the same thing. And he's like, no, absolutely not. It's like, you have a pro quality physique, we're going to the next one we can. And so next one that I had, that was my age brackets. Well, I could compete at any show, but I was 35, 36 at the time. I'm only 37 now, so it's not that long, but it was like Masters Nationals was the next national level show that I could compete at that could potentially turn me pro. And so we were like, okay, we're doing that one. We started to prep for it. It was during 2020. So of course, like most other shows, it got postponed and moved to the end of the year. So I changed my flight stuff, got everything set up for it. And then we just kind of packed it back in, put on additional size, worked through the pandemic portions of it. I never had to take any time off for that, luckily. And we just trained through it. So slowly he eased me back and added more food. Got my metabolizing rate working a lot harder, lowered my normal protocols down to kind of get my body acclimated to that before we ramped back up into show prep. And we just kind of coasted, making my physique better, focusing on widening my back to match my shoulders, getting my waist to look more tapered and more midsection control, focusing on my adductors and inner quad development because my outer sweep was dominant. My inners were a little bit more narrow, hamstring depth, just little nuances that you do as a bodybuilder. He told me I didn't need to do anything for arms. So we really didn't do a lot of arm training, which I still throw it back in because I can't not do that. And we just focused on it. And I just we kept adjusting, went to it. And then push come to shove, we got ready for the show. I went through a lot of like personal turmoil during the show prep, but I think it helped me focus. And, I think it connected me and John a little bit more going through that. And I went to Masters Nationals with the mindset of I'm winning and nothing's going to stop me. And that's exactly what I did.
So talk to us a little bit, Mark, about just kind of like the emotions of that moment. Cause it's like, you've been thinking about this since you were what, late teen, early 20s, and just engrossed in bodybuilding. Like for you, because I've obviously had a lot of pros on, and we've discussed this, and it's different for everybody. Some people fall down and start crying. Some people just say on to the next. How did you kind of work through those feelings and emotions when you knew you won?
Sure. Yeah. And as a competitor that's been around the circuit for a long, I mean, like I said, I've competed since I was in my early 20s. So shows aren't new to me, and disappointment's more consistent than triumph in my path. So after prejudging, I had a good mentality that I was going to win my class and turn professional. I mean, my coach, Kenny Wallace, was there and yelling and screaming in the audience. And he told me, he took me aside and said, yeah, this is going to be yours. I'm like, but you never know. Like after prejudging, I've been told that before, and I've taken a second. And, and so I'm like, yeah, no, yeah, okay, sure. You know, so I just kept like, the foot on the gas. And if anybody that's worked or knows John, like John doesn't believe in taking a day, there's no like taking your foot off the gas or eating weird or anything like that. It's like everything's methodical and stays very consistent. That's exactly what we did. So I told him what happened. He's like, good. Okay, this is what we're doing for the next few hours. So go back to your room, send me pictures in 30 minutes. And so we just kept doing it back and forth, because I was sending pictures to John like every 90 minutes. We'd eat, wait about an hour, more pictures, again, pictures, again, pictures. And so we just do that, take this much water, pictures. And we did the exact same thing. And then came the night show. I did my routine. You know, my class came on. I was like, okay, they, do the lineup. They call them out really fast. I also took the expediter, the announcer aside. I'm like, hey, I want you to announce me as Dr. Mark Chuck Smith if you can. And he started laughing. He's like, really? He's like, you're a doctor? I'm like, yes, please do that. And he did it for me. I was appreciative. And so second place came, and then I won my class. I'm like, yes. Now at Masters Nationals, not every class winner wins a card, but I knew that with me dropping down, because I normally compete at the heavyweight, but for that show I dropped to light heavy because I was kind of teetering leading in, and John wanted to be assured that I would have no competition, and so we forced me down the additional couple of pounds to make sure I made weight. So I made weight that morning or the morning before, and yeah. So anyway, so I won light heavy. And only they give out was it 4, so only the top 4, which I knew like my probability was high as a light heavyweight, as one of the better bodybuilders in the show. Like I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get one. And so when they listed, I didn't win the overall, which I was a little upset about, but my friend Ray did, and he's a good guy. But when they announced me as a pro, I got it. We went off stage, we took pictures. I went backstage, there's nobody there. And then I started crying a bit. Like I don't do it very often. But yeah, it was a flooding of emotion of something that you dream about your entire life. I mean, it hits you. You did it. Like, wow. Like it's one of those pipe dreams that people talk about. I hear it in passing all the damn time in gyms, like, oh, I'm gonna do this when I turn pro. I'm like, yeah, you have no idea what you're talking about, but okay. Do a couple shows, win a couple regional level shows, and everyone gets a big head about how they're gonna run the gamut of turning pro. And then myself and like my gym owner Rob Farrow, who's an old school style bodybuilder, and then a few other colleagues and acquaintances you've had on here that have gone through lots of trials and tribulations to get there. Yeah, it's not an easy venture. Not everybody's going to be a Phil Heath or a Derek Lunsford that do 4 shows and turn pro type situation. That is not normal. So yeah, it was quite an emotional thing. I didn't really know what to do. I was there by myself. I didn't bring a posse or a group. I compete alone, and that's how I always do it, because I never really had a support system. So that's what I do. And so I went to dinner with some acquaintances that had no idea about bodybuilding, and we talked politics and business. And I fielded the few hundred messages I got through social media and texting. I talked to my coach, John, on the way to the restaurant that we went to. I told him I wanted to compete immediately. He's like, no, not yet. And because I wanted to go to the Puerto Rican Pro like that year, because I wanted an excuse to go. But he told me, no, we're going to take a time. And that's what we did. So we spent the next 1.5 years preparing for my pro debut, which will be in May.
Cool. So before we talk about your pro debut, I want to ask you, Mark, are you glad? What's your perspective on how long it took for you to earn your IFBB Pro card? Are you appreciative now that you've got it, looking back like, man, like I grinded, I put in the work, or do you kind of wish it would have happened earlier? What's your take on that?
I don't really know. It's a fair question. I'm just happy it happened, with all honesty. I can't really like speculate if I could have got it sooner, or it doesn't. I can't even think about that. Like I would. I don't know. I don't want to go back to life without it. Just like my degrees. But I don't know if I got it sooner. I don't know if I'd be any better, any different situation. I know if I would have done it by myself or did a lot younger, I'd probably been a lot more cockier and a lot more of a. I probably would have washed out of the sport like most youngsters do. Because they didn't have the right head on their shoulders, and I wasn't right path career-wise. I didn't have the stability or the family structure or the mental fortitude to understand what this lifestyle brings and does. Yeah, and I didn't have the companionship for that either. So I don't. Yeah, I'm glad it happened when it did, because now I'm in my twilight years. My work schedule is a lot more lenient. I have a child. My daughter's 6. I can share it with her. I have a super wonderful girlfriend counterpart that's also IFBB Pro and knows and gets it, and so it makes it a lot easier for me to continue on, even as my age is 37. I'm not dead, but I know I'm getting in my twilight years of bodybuilding. But yeah, I'd rather have it now than have like squandered it away in my youth and just look back and be like, oh, I wish what could have been if I just like kept my shit together.
Makes a lot of sense. Do you have maybe some words of wisdom or words of advice for maybe some of those younger listeners that are just getting into bodybuilding? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would tell them that this sport, especially nowadays, I mean, because you know, when we first started in this stuff, it was not as objective and not as social media wasn't in your life wasn't on a display all the time. People didn't care what you did behind closed doors, or they wanted to see your cool training videos. They wanted to see the black and white photos. They got to see you on stage for just a few moments of time, and that was about it. Now, like, everyone's chasing this social bullshit and in this objectifying, like trying to get popular social media wise, and we have people in our sport that are terrible representations of who we are and what we do, and we have people that are insta famous. You can get lost in it, is my big takeaway, as much as I'm ranting here. You have to, the focus is that your attention to your physique is not attention to you. You're being objectified by the way you look, and opposed to any female model, actor, actress, etc. You have to be ingrained, and you have to understand that you are an individual outside of the sport, and that you have a mind, you have a career, you have other things that are not gravitated around the way that you look. And I think for a lot of the younger people in the sport, or newer to the sport, they get kind of sucked into this, my physique, like I am my physique. And then having like, a heavy set off season, or like having those weight push holds, or like not looking perfect in pictures, as we don't all the time, that kills them. Like they don't have proper off seasons. They won't do the push threshold to get the proper weight and threshold. Like you look at guys like how I emulated Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, Branch Warren. These guys got their size not comfortably. Like there has been gross looking pictures of them sitting down, fat moon faced, huge amounts of weight that they had to put on to get to the status that they're at, because we all have to push through that threshold. You can't stay pretty all the time. That's just not how it works. And I think if you get stuck in that ingrained attention, that you can easily have it taken from you. Once your physique kind of slips, or you start to not do so well in shows, or you start to not be in the limelight or not be recognized for your physique because there's a newer person coming out, they lose their shit, and they don't like, well, who am I now? Because I'm not this beacon that everyone's looking at physique wise. Like, no, you're an individual. You figure out for your own. You have a mind. You have you're not your body. What are you bringing to the table? There's got to be more to the story. And there's more to life than bodybuilding. Like this sport doesn't pay any much of anything unless you're a top level elite athlete. And most of the time, most of us are financing this crap on our own. It's not something that you're going to make multi-million dollars. There's no health insurance attached to it as well. So if you don't have a job, like if you don't have a job that labors for, if you get injured, you're screwed too. IFBB and NPC ain't paying for shit. So what I'm getting at is like you have to have a grounded foundation outside of this sport and enjoy doing this for yourself. If you're doing it for attention, or you get kind of ingrained into this like superficialness of it, you're gonna wash out, and it's not gonna long last. You're gonna have this constant back and forth of like, who am I? What am I doing? I'm not going anywhere type situation. And then when it's all taken from you, because it's going to be taken from all of us at some point in time. Well, who are you then? And what are you supposed to do? Are you gonna be that like sad guy that just kind of sad like trainer that tries to like make bodybuilders that you once were because you have no money or ability to do it yourself? You have no career outside of it? Or were you business savvy and like set yourself up to be successful and have relationships and friends and family that are there afterwards? So that's key.
Very well put. Love that, Mark. Okay, so we're going to wrap up our conversation. Before we do, you said your pro debut is going to be in May. So what show are you going to be competing in, and what are your goals going into that show?
It's be May 14th. It's the Indianapolis Pro. I'm waiting on the contracts to formalize it, because this is being a pro is all new to me and fun. But yeah, that will be my pro debut. I'm not sure if I'll do any shows after that, because I just focused on the one for now. The goal is to, my mindset and goal is to try to obtain a qualification for Olympia. And if that means winning the show, that means winning the show. And so that's my mindset. I'm going to enjoy the process. I'm going to be starstruck when I get there, and I'm going to be in awe while I enjoy being not in the crowd and being in backstage. But we have a goal and a job to do, and I'm going to bring the best that I can to it. And I'm hoping that that's pro quality enough to deem me an invite.
Cool, man. I have had a handful of other guys on the podcast, over the last month or 2-3 months, that they're planning on having the Indy Pro as their pro debut too. So I think that's gonna be a pretty legit tough lineup. Open 212. I'm assuming you're gonna be competing in 212, correct?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So this is just kind of a fun question, then we'll close it out here, Mark. But is there like one guy within the current IFBB Pro circuit 212 that you would love to stand on stage next to, maybe somebody that you've looked up to over the last several years?
Yeah, John Jewett, of course, because I'd love to compete against my coach.
That would be cool.
But it's I'm trying to think of the current lineups. If David Henry is still competing, I think he did last year. He was a huge inspiration for a smaller guy. And he lives in Tucson, Arizona. And so it would be cool to stand next to him, because I used to watch his career a lot. And then if I got to stand next to Sean, I'm very curious to see how tall he is in real life. And then it would be my honor if James Lewis, or Flax as they call him, would be on the stage for 212, even though he's not going to do that again. I'd love to be able to stand next to him. But and also, I'm just a bodybuilding fan, so my God, I'm just thinking of all the guys that do 212 classes. If Jose Raymond comes back, that'd be cool too. Like all these guys I used to watch when I was younger and still an amateur. But yeah, and then so even Kamal, who pretty much any 212 top 5 Olympian would be awesome. But like the ones I would hope to stand next to at the Indy Pro, like I doubt my coach would do the show, but if John's there, that'd be awesome to stand next to John, who's the guy that got me here. And then if Clarita's not going to do it because he's already qualified and there's no point, but that'd be cool too, because he's there. And then and I'm just curious to meet Derek Lunsford, just because I've met him acquaintance briefly at USA's when he turned pro, and just to see how he's kind of grown into the 212 champ that he is. But starstruck, unless James comes back or Jose's there, that's pretty much the only two that I would be like, oh my God. And David Henry, just because I've been watching his career for such a long period of time.
Very cool. Okay, so I thought that was gonna be the last question, but I got to ask you, the Shark, where does that nickname come from? What's the impetus behind that?
Sure. All right. So when I played lacrosse, I put my mouthpiece on the top of my helmet and stick out, so it looked kind of like a dorsal fin. So one of my teammates made the funny term of Mark the Shark. So I was like, oh, I like that. And then when I entertained the idea of becoming a WWE wrestler and actually like trained to do it, that was my stage name. And then so I got a bunch of custom made stuff done when I was like 16, 17 years old. That logo is still in presence. It's tattooed on my lower stomach. Like I've had that logo since I was 17 years old. So it just stuck, and it's something that just kind of makes sense, works, and I just like it.
Love it, man. That's so cool. All right, Mark. So before I close this out today, I want to kind of give you the platform just to share any final thoughts, any final words, any shout outs, where people can find you on social media, even though it might not be your thing. Anything that you want to leave us with, go for it, and then I will wrap it up.
Sure, of course. And social media is a necessary evil, so I embrace it wholeheartedly. If you want to find me, I have my own website. It's www.drmarkdeshark.com. I want to give a huge shout out to Diesel Muscle, where I trained and turned pro. I also train people out of there on occasion as well. Rob Farrell, who owns it, fantastic person. My wonderful girlfriend, Renee Marvin, who's been a wonderful support system. John Jewett, who's the guy that pretty much coached me to where I am today. Kenny Wallace, the best posing coach in the industry, and definitely he's got the best hair too. And as far as just like what I can instill in anybody that's looking to gravitate to bodybuilding or just do it in general, you got to do it for you, not for attention, not for anything else. The greats of this sport and the guys that got where they are at the top of the food chain did it because there was an ingrained want and need in them that did it. They didn't have, their inspirations came from magazines and DVDs, not from followers or whatever it is that people are chasing sometimes today. It's a passion that you have to instill, and it's something that's going to be a lifelong venture. It's not going to be a quick-willed thing. And anything in this world that matters or means something is going to take time, energy, and work, and a lot of emotion, and a lot more pain than success that comes from it. So take your time with it. It's a marathon, not a race, and get where you want to, but make sure that you have not a backup plan, but that you have a life outside of the sport, because at one point in time, this will have a beginning, middle, and an end. And who are you after that point dictates who you're going to be for the rest of your life.
Excellent. All right, Mark, I appreciate you taking some time and chop it up with us. Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. All of you who are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you to you. If it wasn't for you, the podcast wouldn't exist. A couple quick things here before we wrap it up. If you haven't done so already, make sure you go to the YouTube channel Behind the Muscle and hit that subscribe button. Really important, because I release all these episodes first on YouTube, and then I will distribute them to the other podcast platforms. And then one final one other request I would have for you, favor I'd ask, is take this episode of Mark specifically, make sure you share it on your Instagram stories, tag Mark, tag Behind the Muscle, so that we know that you listened to this episode specifically and found great value in it. It's also another great way for more people to find the podcast. More people will listen, and more people are going to be positively impacted. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.